Hey, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slupski, and we are back for part 2 of the epic two-parter victory at Volcania. And I could not do this without my partner in crime for this resort island adventure with Mr. Karl Stern from whenitwascool.com. Karl, welcome back to Joe on Joe.
Thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here. Had a blast doing the last episode. Sparse though it may be, a lot of fun. This is not by far not the worst Deke episodes you could ever have. So thank you very much for having me on here.
Oh man, it's really my pleasure. We talked a lot last week about your website When It Was Cool. You guys, if you haven't had a chance to listen to last week's episode, please go back and hear it. But and if you don't want to go back and hear it, then go online and just straight up go to whenitwascool.com. Karl's got a great podcast. You find him on Twitter at WIWCool. It's on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. They talk about just stuff that they loved. It's all nostalgia fuel, man. It's just all the stuff that he and his wife, Tanya, loved, and they get into great details. It's a really enjoyable show. Karl, you're calling in from Alabama.
Yes, I am. That's right.
And
North Alabama.
We established last episode your name is Dragon King Karl. You're the G.I. Joe forensic investigations expert.
I am.
I appreciate that greatly. And so one thing that we didn't talk about last episode that I wanted to get into today, which ties in very, very much with a lot of the G.I. Joe stuff we talk about, is you've got a history with professional wrestling.
That's right. That's exactly right. Probably, I guess, if I'm known for anything, that would be the thing I'm most known for. Originally started out doing my own newsletter, doing my own publication back in the 1990s. And I became involved in that world and actually did it for a while on the independent scene for, I don't know, a couple of years, but realized one thing real quick. I am too clumsy and not athletic enough to be doing that. So what happened was...
What was your wrestling name? What was your wrestling name?
That's it.
Was it Dragon King
That's
Karl?
right, yeah.
Oh,
yes, there was an old-time wrestler by the name of Ken Timms, and he was around back in the 1980s. And he gave me that name. I didn't come up with it. In fact, I one day walked into the dressing room and he said, "Hey, you know what? Your name's Karl Stern now." And I'm like, "Well, I guess that's what it is." So that's so from there on out, I just used that name professionally and switched over really to journalism, to writing insider business newsletters and stuff like that. And hooked up many years ago with a guy who does the largest, most well-known professional wrestling newsletter in the business, Dave Meltzer, in the Wrestling Observer newsletter. So he is like the kingpin of insider professional wrestling news, and later really become one of the most respected mixed martial art journalists as well. And that
website is WrestlingObserver.com.
Absolutely, WrestlingObserver.com. And so through that site, I was given a classic wrestling audio show. And I have been doing that now for about 10 years, where I just talk old school classic professional wrestling. I'm on there a couple times a month. And we just talk. Essentially, I became, I guess, for lack of a better term, a wrestling historian, known for the history of pro wrestling. And I got hooked into a deal where I did like a research paper on this would be in the late 1990s. There were two major companies, one WWE, which is still around. The other WCW was owned by Ted Turner and Turner Sports. And they were involved in litigation with a group of wrestlers. And I was hired by their attorneys to do sort of fact finding, see if there's anything to this litigation, see if there's anything to these accusations, to crunch numbers and come up with information. And I did so, and was actually deemed by the court in the state of Georgia, where this happened in Atlanta, Georgia, as of all things, of the most ridiculous thing you can become an expert for. I'm a court certified expert in professional wrestling, if you can believe that or not. Deemed so by the state court of Georgia.
That's great.
So I thought to myself, you're probably the only person on maybe Earth who has this distinction. Can I monetize that? And monetize it, I tried to do through the Classic Wrestling Audio Show over at WrestlingObserver.com. Been going along for that way for a long time now. And my website, when it was cool, I started it just over a year ago with my wife, Tanya, as just kind of a spinoff, kind of try to do my own thing, try to kind of get out there and talk about not just wrestling, but other stuff I'm interested in, retro pop culture, classic rock music, G.I. Joe, obviously, Star Wars, comic books, just have fun, talk about fun stuff. And that's how I got to be where I am.
Well, it definitely shines through. I haven't heard any of your Wrestling Pod stuff, but I've definitely listened to multiple episodes of the When It Was Cool podcast with you guys, and there is a joy and a fun that 100% shines through. So kudos on that, and keep that
really
up.
Appreciate that.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Absolutely. Hey, so you're calling from Alabama. One of my very good actual personal friends out here, but he's been on the show quite a bit. Pablo Romero Esteves. He works with and promotes an outfit out of New Orleans called Wildcat Wrestling. Do you know? Are you familiar?
Absolutely. Of course, yeah. I've heard they're one of the more well-known, popular independent wrestling promotions in the country. Absolutely, yeah.
I'm
very familiar with it.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah. That's my boy Pablo's outfit, and
we
always want to hype Wildcat when we can.
Oh yeah, they've got a great reputation and are absolutely considered one of the better independent leagues out there.
Cool. Well, I'll tell him you said that because I don't think he listens. He's not a bitch yet.
That's a shame.
I listen, man, as a podcaster of a very specific audience podcast. I love talking to my friends just in I've known forever, and I'll talk about the podcast, and then I'll say something, and they'll go, oh yeah, and I just look at them and go, thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting my show.
Exactly.
So yeah, and it's what's really funny about that is for years, like I grew up a big fan of AM talk radio out of Chicago. It was huge in the 90s, and I fell in love with hearing people talk about things in sports talk and things like that, and yes. even like Howard Stern. I was a big fan of Stern, and you would hear them say, and this is Howard Stern of all people. You would hear him say something like, "Oh, my wife never listens," or whatever. And I would always, as a fan, I'd be like, "How could you not listen? Like, if my wife had a show, I'd be listening every day." And then you start doing podcasts every day, and doing them in and out, week on week, and you realize, no, those fools don't want to hear from me anymore. They see me all the time. Like they don't. Like, I get it. Yeah. I totally get it. Like.
Exactly. Yeah. I when I first started doing the wrestling stuff, anytime something I would do would be in the newspaper, and that stuff that I did with WCW, it got picked up by the Los Angeles Times, by ESPN, by Fox News, some big legit outfits,
Yeah.
And you think I got clippings of any of that? Nah, no. I think I got the USA Today copy somewhere, but the other stuff, nah.
It's funny. Yeah. My mom saved all my clippings from high school, and then I think she was like, all right, we're done. Like, yeah, we're done. I got all your football clippings. That's it. We're done. I'm like, but I got a cartoon in college. Yeah, we're done. I got a podcast. We're done. You're an adult. Move on.
That's it.
Yeah. That's really, really funny. So wrestling has such a big impact with G.I. Joe and big crossover with G.I. Joe, whether, Sergeant Slaughter and just, it's weird. I always find it weird that they never, with all the crossovers that the WWF, and for me in my heart, got to say it'll always be WWF, that the WWF did with music and video games and stuff, there wasn't a legit crossover with G.I. Joe, right? Outside of actual Sergeant Slaughter.
That's right. That's WWF or WWE now is infamously control hungry. I mean, they very much are in control of their intellectual property. So at the time, Sergeant Slaughter had to leave WWF to become part of G.I. Joe. So that's the whole deal. He was out on the independent circuit, the AWA and other groups when he did the G.I. Joe stuff, because they specifically said it was over the action figures. They were WWF were going to do action figures. Sergeant Slaughter was going to have one with Hasbro, and they said no. You're either going to be with us or you're not going to do it. And so he walked out and did GI Joe, and I think to his credit, because he became a really well-known pop culture star at that point, far more than I think he would have been if he'd just stayed in wrestling. And of course, ultimately, he went back there anyway, so it all worked out. But not only that, but of course, you've got a couple others. There was a convention exclusive Roddy Piper that was released one time, and then of course, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson later played in the second GI Joe movie. Several figures in. So
it does stand out to me though that they never did an official tie-in, and now I feel like with after I guess like what they called the Attitude Era, where it got very TNA, and all that stuff. I can see how Hasbro wouldn't want to do that. But in the 80s, before it got that, before when just Miss Elizabeth in a very covered up dress but looking glamorous, but that was like the height of like wrestling eroticism,
exactly.
Like I can see how at that time it wouldn't have been too far of a stretch to do some kind of tie-ins. You could see a couple guys dressed as GI Joe come running into the ring, do a GI Joey Royal Rumble. Oh, that'd be amazing.
The GI Joe outfits, especially later on, were totally pro wrestling outfits. I mean, they completely crossed over. Like a military guy. Come on, wrestling's done that a million times.
That's all I want to see.
Yeah, it's perfect.
That's all I want to see now. I just want to see a Cobra Joe Royal Rumble or a giant tag team match or something. Oh my God, we need to. Okay, this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna talk to Pablo. We're gonna get Wildcat to do a cosplay Joe Cobra tag team match. If Joe and Joe has to sponsor it, that's what we'll do. We'll run it on the Patreon page. That's what we'll do.
No doubt. That's wonderful. You can't tell me that Serpentor isn't straight out of pro wrestling. I mean, Serpentor is straight out of wrestling.
So Serpentor would be a manager that gets involved halfway through the match. They'd be like, man, you're pretty buff for a manager. He'd be like, this I command, because he would be telling everyone what to do. This I command, this I command. And then halfway through the match, he would just lose it and throw a snake spear at somebody and then jump in the ring. Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, this is writing itself. This is okay. I got a bug in my butt about this now. I don't know what we're gonna do with this, Karl, but I'm super excited. So today we are watching a Victory of Volcania Part 2. I'm excited. We left on a big cliffhanger. Cobra had just destroyed the Golden Gate Bridge. The G.I. Joes were undercover as Vipers. And, of course, Cobra had invaded the G.I. Joe Western Relaxation Island that Old Man Hawk, I feel like now, since they did the Old Man Logan comic book and now they're doing Old Man Hawkeye, everyone has to be Old Man something.
Yeah.
So Old Man Hawk was put in charge of it, even though he doesn't look old and really.
Yes, and that the resort lacked both rest or relaxation.
Yeah, there's very little. They had a tennis court that they played football across, and that was
they had an alligator in it.
And an alligator, a random alligator. Because the only alligator that I remember was Crocmaster's alligator, as far as toys go. I don't think one of the Joes had an alligator, did they?
Apparently Pathfinder has one he wrestled.
Yeah, apparently as he was using his weed whacker, he uncovered an alligator. And Ambush was like, hey, I was going to hide over there later. Stop weed whacking my ambush spots. All right. Remember to go online, check out Karl at WIWCool, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. While you're on those modalities of conversation, check me out at Joe and Joe Pod. Send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Let me know what you think of the show. If you want to be a guest on the show, we'd love to have you. And remember to go to patreon.com/joeandjoepod. Started a new podcast called Joe and Joe Illustrated, and it's where I'm breaking down every single issue of the G.I. Joe comic book. And we are going deep divings. It is not a review show. That's one thing I'm really excited about. I'm not doing a review. I'm not reading a book and giving you my thought on it. I'm actually breaking down each book from a scholarly way. And we're talking about the history of the medium, books that were on shelf at the time, where these issues fell in the span of comics as a whole. It's a real comic book focused podcast. And so you can find that at patreon.com/JoeOnJoePod.
I'm excited.
Oh,
Excited about those comics.
oh man, I can't wait for you to hear. We're going to release about every 5th episode is going to be released on the main pod, so you guys can see what you're missing, and then come on over to the Patreon and check it out. So, Carl, you
I've
ready?
heard the first one already.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Did you enjoy it?
Loved it. Perfect. Oh, amazing.
Love it.
Huge fan.
Love it, love it, love it. So, we're going to start with Victor Volcania Part 2. Ready to go, my friend?
Let's do it.
All right. And here we go. So, last episode, I brought up the wrestling aspect of this song because I knew you had the wrestling connection. So, I mean, this is really a wrestling intro. You know?
Yes. I hate this song. I hate it.
But like Hulk Hogan would come into this song. You know, like
totally would. I mean,
so,
this is 100%.
so close to Real American.
Yes, absolutely. But every time this song comes on, I mean, as bad as it was, I keep wanting to go international hero.
Yeah,
I hate that too.
Yeah. It's not as good. It's not as good as the original, objectively, but
I give them credit for trying.
They tried something different and to differentiate itself. You know, it did feel weird. Honestly, it felt weird hearing, and I know it was a different version of the original one on the Dragonfire show.
Yeah.
You know, they use different lyrics and stuff, but it did feel weird hearing that song on a different cartoon. So I'm okay. I'm okay with it. I mean, Spider-Man, possibly the greatest song, cartoon theme ever. Here Comes the Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. If you hear that on like the 90s animated or any of the new, they've done a ton of Spider-Man cartoons, it wouldn't feel right. Like it's very specific to that show. So I'm okay with them trying something different.
Yeah. And as far as catchphrases go, got to get tough is there's worse.
Yeah.
Worse
Well, you know what? It's funny. As we're talking, we're getting the recap of the show, and it's basically what we talked about before. But I feel like Salvo wrote the lyrics to that song. Like the right of the guy who coined the right of might was like, hey, I got an idea. Got to get tough.
Yo Joe. There's your song.
There's your song.
Goes,
I get songwriting royalties, right? Like that's
he may be.
Yeah, that's what happens, right? Got to get tough.
G.I. Joe's on a worldwide alert. It looks like Cobra's got a secret base somewhere.
We've got the Joes.
We already know where it is. The hard
they're
way.
calling back to the pit. And that's our and who are they talking to? Who is that guy? That guy's got a Navy. That's
no
free.
idea.
That's their. I know the one dude is the new parachute guy. I think his name's Freefall.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
right.
Freefall. So I know that's Freefall for sure. Oh, the other guy, I know who it is. That's Topside. That was Topside.
These are some deep cut GI Joes here.
Yeah, they really are. And he was the he's the Navy assault seaman.
Yeah.
And
can I just point out that the fact that Cobra blew up the ComSat-1 satellite hasn't really seemed to matter that much because he's talking to all the people of the world on TV. G.I. Joe seems to have no problem communicating. That satellite doesn't seem that important in retrospect.
What's funny is the joke we made, and I didn't make that realizing that it was going to be actually what happened. We joked that all he was going to do was knock out people's cable. And later in that episode, that was the complaints that he got when he made his declaration of the world. People were like, I want to watch Bowling for $. That was the complaint that he did. But listen, as far as threats go, you make the threat with something small to show your power. You don't necessarily like blow up a city first and be like, hey, fools, So I get that a little bit.
Yeah, and taking out the bridge. That's things are escalating.
Yeah, these Vipers, these guys are the creeper ones. These are range Vipers.
Right.
They're the ones that look like zombies, like straight zombies with their brains exposed. Like, what is that about? Like, I don't.
The smile on their face.
I'm looking at. Here's the thing. I'm looking at they're the Cobra Will. I'm looking at the file card right now as we're talking. They're the Cobra Wilderness Troopers. It doesn't say anything about why they look like, why their brains are exposed and why they look like monsters.
Yeah. Is that their mask? Is that
I
them?
Don't know.
I don't have a file card to one, so I don't know if these are resurrected dead Vipers or what. is.
So that's the first one. Looks like these guys with the creepy look. They did a version in 2005 that they don't have that creeper look to it. They just have they kind of look like ninjas a little bit, I would say.
Yeah.
And then there was a version in 2006 that gave them the creepy look again, but it was obviously just a face, like it wasn't, their brains weren't exposed. And then in 2009,
I say we hit the volcano now,
they did another version that kind of went back to the ninja look a little bit. But their helmet is still crazy. So this one is the only one that is like no explanation for it. They look like zombies.
Absolutely, yeah. And there is no explanation. I mean, there's no, like, what did they do? I don't know.
Well, what, range vipers, what do they do? They're the wilderness troopers, technically. You know, listen, vipers are weird because they say that they have all these specialties, and then they never put them on the beachfront. They had alley vipers running around, you know.
Yeah, you're just as likely to have one of the snow troopers in the downtown in an urban environment. So yeah,
this is a great scene. Hawk was just making a plea that he's not too old to be retired. That was a cool scene. There's still things 10 years ago that was good enough.
Cobra's deadline isn't far off.
Yeah, they're starting to get to him.
Oh, they really are. This is weird. So Topside is they gave him a mustache, like an orange mustache and a goatee thingy. Topside doesn't have that. His figure does not have that. He's clean shaven. Or does he? Wait a minute. Hold on. Wait a minute.
Sounds like Gridiron's got their attention at the front door.
His figure does have it. His figure has it, but his file card doesn't.
Right.
That's what's weird about it.
Move in.
You know what? I'm wrong. The file card is just it's because it's orange on kind of orangish skin. It's blending in a little bit.
It's fading in.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So they just went more robust. That's all. So they're on point. They're on point. I want to, before we go too much further, I want to point out they had a neat thing on when they were planning this operation. They showed a schematic of the Joe R&R base, and it was very much like the schematics that we get in the comic book.
Which I love. They need to bring that back.
Yeah,
so
like that was pretty cool. I like that they did that on this show. So like, oh yeah, there's a motor pool. Like, so maybe this R&R base, which they never actually show us, is all underneath. It's all underground.
It could be, yeah.
I mean, I guess essentially that's what Cobra's taken over. You know, in a way, that's kind of what's
because
happening.
Right. This, I mean, even if there is a R&R aspect to it, this is a full-fledged military base. I mean, they showed last episode they've got an airstrip.
Yeah, they had all. Yeah. You'd think it'd be staffed with a little more personnel. And again, here we go, Lady J, who doesn't have any lines.
Yeah, like any of the other females. If I'm the U.S. government and I'm building an air base, do I really put it on an island with a volcano? An active one, apparently.
Active one? No, probably not. Although it didn't go active until Cobra dropped that. Now I don't know.
They drilled into.
Yeah, I guess I technically don't know the definition of an active volcano. Yeah. Like, is an active volcano one that they just have to drill into? Is that's considered active or is dormant? We're gonna go to commercial real quick. Today's file card features on the Cobra Wilderness Troopers, codenamed Range Vipers. The Range Vipers are usually committed to long-term operations deep within unfriendly territory, completely cut off from communications or supplies. They have an unusually high tolerance for discomfort and can survive on a diet of snakes, grubs, roots, berries, nuts, and whatever slow rodents they can catch. They are expected to build their shelters out of indigenous materials, usually rocks and mud, and procure their own ammunition by way of hit-and-run raids on enemy ammo depots. Quote, Range Vipers are favorites of the Cobra High Command, since they are so inexpensive to sustain. Once they're in the field, they don't cost anything to feed, clothe, and arm. Range Vipers don't care who they shoot, as long as they shoot at someone or something. That's why the Cobra High Command makes sure they stay out in the bush. So you heard us talking about the Range Viper on today's episode. He is one of the more peculiar Vipers that I've seen in all this later run of the Joe guys. Primarily because his helmet looks like a skull with an exposed brain. And there doesn't seem to be any correlation with that and what his specialty is. Like, how would that help you survive in the field. We've had one of our fans, I think we commented on one of our Instagram posts, and he said it's like to scare the enemy, and that makes sense, except it's not mentioned on the card at all. And I don't know how that would help you. Like, it just seems it seems like a crazy character design for someone, to live out in the wilderness. They did later versions of them, and those versions don't seem to have the exposed brain part. They look more traditionally clad, in gray and blue and things like that. But I've got to give him credit because he is absolutely an insane looking character. And he shows up a lot on these DSC's episodes. So I'm on board. Check him out. It came out in 1990, and he's got a green shirt, black pants. Like, he is a crazy look. So Range Viper, whoever you are, and for whatever reason you got your brains exposed, we salute you. Got to get top. Real quick, mentally rewind. Metalhead caught,
which means it's up to us to
they
destroy
caught,
the
it was
space
Lady
guns.
J and one of the other Joes, and now we know that Metalhead wanted to say the word bang. He
Yes.
said, but he was talking to a woman, and he said, "Destro, can I say the B word?" And I'm like, that had to be on purpose. That had to be an intentional funny little joke. Because that's kind of funny. Like, it's kind of funny.
Oh, of course. I'm yeah. Well, if you think about it, that is kind of.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how I feel about Metalhead. Like, I want to hate him, and at the same time, he's largely one of the more animated. I don't know.
It's okay to hate him. It's okay to hate him.
I want to hate him, but
he's too cartoon. I don't hate him on principle. I don't dislike the concept of a dude that carries missiles around him. He's the new Scrap Iron, right? So that's fine.
Yes.
Scrap Iron, same thing, except his missiles were in a box. He didn't carry them on his person, right? I'm fine with that, and I'm fine with him being a little lunatic. It's just that on this show, he's a cartoon on a cartoon. He's Daffy Duck.
Yes,
and
you're right. Yeah,
a problem. For
perfect.
Yeah.
You're right. He's exactly Daffy Duck.
Yeah, he's Daffy Duck, and I don't need that on this show. Like,
it will be like shooting bozos in a barrel.
Okay,
At least not as much.
Cobra Commander just said shooting bozos in a barrel. Like, shooting ducks in a barrel. And isn't there an analogy about clowns, or is that clown car? It's not clowns in a barrel, right? Because bozo's a clown. Are we shooting clowns?
I think that is a straight up Cobra Commander analogy. That perhaps that's what he did.
Yeah. Wait a minute. You're right. He just revealed that on his free time he likes to shoot clowns.
Well,
he likes to get a bunch of people dressed as Bozo and Cookie, throw them in barrels and shoot them. That's a sadistic side. Here we go. Hawk struggling with the onset of age, trying to climb a mountain. Although right around this time, I'm just going to say, Hawk, William Shatner was famously scaling mountains freehand in Star Trek movies, and he would have been the same age.
They are, exactly.
Do you remember that? I forget which one it was, but it opens on an obvious body double of Bill Shatner free climbing rocks, and you're like, Kirk, you're 80.
They are driving home the old man point on Hawk on this series, this two-parter, no doubt,
for sure.
We're gonna punt you off this
even though he
so
doesn't
fast
look a day
your
over
head will
like
swim.
38.
With all your
okay.
prisoners and with no weapons.
Captain Gridiron once again just used a football pun. We're gonna punt you off this island.
Yeah, Captain Gridiron's probably my least favorite character on these shows. He is just too much for me.
Yeah. Well, we're coming. Listen, we're just a couple episodes away from the one where they play football, so we're gonna get a whole lot of Captain Gridiron on that one.
Like, I tried to explain it to myself. I tried to go, well, you know what? Army and Navy have a football team, and he was somebody. Maybe he was like an all-star there.
Well,
and G.I. Joe sitting around going, you know what we really need as a specialist? We need somebody who can throw a football really well. So they recruit. Maybe I could stretch it and make it work. I don't know. But
they call the boys in the armament, and they're like, hey, I need some football-shaped grenades. Well, we have regular grenades that cost the taxpayers pennies on the dollar because we mass produce 5 million of them at a time. So why doesn't he just use a regular grenade? No.
Nope.
We need to retool the dies and make football-shaped grenades. But that's going to cost the taxpayers like, I don't know, like 10 times the amount of money. Yeah. We understand that. But this guy's...
But you don't know, yeah.
You don't know.
You don't know who we've got coming.
Did you not watch the Super Bowl 3 years ago? Did you not see what he can do with a football? You don't love America? Is that it? You hate America. Okay, you hate America. Just make the football-shaped grenade. That's what it is.
Cobra space guns outrange every battle wagon in that fleet.
This is a neat... So we've got a big brigade of people. We got a Sky Patrol coming. We've got... I think that's the Retaliator. There's a bunch of Retaliators, I think is the name of the ship.
Oh, yeah.
There's a bunch of like C-130s just flying. And so, I mean, there's a lot of Joes here. This would have been this would have been a cool moment to draw all the old Joes. You know?
Yeah, we won't see these people.
Yeah, like not necessarily voice them because I get it. You don't want to pay. I get it. But draw, like just give me Shipwreck, give me Snake Eyes, give me Spirit, like give me Alpine and Bazooka, because Alpine and Bazooka would be down on this. Alpine would be yodeling this mountain apart right now.
Totally.
This would have been a cool moment. This is actually this attack sequence makes me think of in the G.I. Joe live action movie, the first one, where they showed the pit and they showed you that there's all these other soldiers there and they're a part of it, and none of the other soldiers were dressed like G.I. Joe guys. They were all dressed like soldiers. And I'm watching it going, well, we're going to commercial break. Hey, listeners, I'm not sure if you've heard the news, but Joe and Joe has started a Patreon, and I'm inviting you along for the ride. Go to patreon.com/JoeandJoePod and check out my page. Right now, there are 2 opportunities for you to help support the show. You can choose to be a Grunt or a Viper. Grunts get access to all the Joe and Joe episodes and early access to new episodes as they're created. Vipers get all that and access to my all-new spin-off podcast, Joe and Joe Illustrated, where I will be breaking down every single issue of the G.I. Joe comic books, page by page, in the deepest dive you'll ever hear on G.I. Joe. So go to patreon.com/JoeandJoePod and see what's happening over at the Fort Wadsworth Motor Pool. We'll see you there. Got to get top G.I. Joe! Back from commercial, and I'm watching the G.I. Joe movie, seeing all these random soldiers in the background, and I'm thinking, how much money could you have spent just to get a cosplay designer in there and just put him in different outfits, put him in the football uniform, put him in the Shipwreck shirt, put him in, you know what I mean? And just have him as background, and just to show the fans that we know what you're all about, and these are the guys that you want to care about, and they're there, and they exist in this world. It's a bigger world. And I don't understand why they didn't do that. I'll never understand that.
No, and it would have been so simple, and like you said, it would have cost would have been very little because they're just background characters. Yeah,
you literally could have hired cosplayers. You could have put the word out and said, "Hey, G.I. Joe cosplayers, who's really good? We needed this. We needed this. We needed." They could have done a contest to raise raise for advertising for the movie.
Yeah,
like your favorite G.I. Joe cosplayer will have a part in a background of the movie. That would have been amazing.
Not to mention goodwill toward the G.I. Joe community that's going to get on social media and talk about this and go, "Hey, did you see Bazooka's jersey? It was in there. It was over in this." A dude
just walked by with the Right of Might shirt on. Like that's it. Yeah. It's a T-shirt. You just spent $5 to get a silkscreen T-shirt, and you just made so many fans extremely happy. You know, I'll never understand why the decisions like that don't happen anymore. Got some exciting stuff here, though. And if you've seen the movie Annihilation, which actually I'm not a huge fan of, but I did see it. And at the end of it, the finale takes place on a beach, and there's all these crystals that have grown out of the ground. So if you've seen Annihilation with Natalie Portman, this is they're fighting on the beach at the end of Annihilation. All these crystal trees.
Exactly right.
Yeah. And again, here's Zorana with no voice.
Yeah. Why could they not replace those characters with somebody else if they weren't going to voice them?
Destro is the GOAT in this episode.
Okay, guys, let's take him
Destro is like,
We aren't going anywhere, Destro.
Like suns up, guns up. Like his arms are huge. He might be the Rock in this episode.
Lasers can't even dent that.
And whoever's voicing him now after the last series,
after Burkhart, it's not.
Yeah,
great.
it's no,
it's
no.
not.
It's
not. Ambush is in trouble because Ambush literally just got ambushed, and he doesn't know what to do. Ambush is like, I'm the one who ambushes people.
He's out of his element.
Yeah, all these range vipers just ambushed me. I don't know what to do.
You're awful heavy for a general.
It's like, how'd you do that?
Yeah, wait a minute. Hold on a second.
Show me that again.
Now, these guys are literally bozos in a barrel getting shot at, but Hawk's keeping up. Hawk's doing a good job. He and Ambush, their job here, listeners, is to, they got to break the lava flow that they're getting from Volcania. And that's what's charging the space guns. So their job, if they can stop that flow, then the energy will stop going, and then the space guns won't be able to destroy the incoming G.I. Joe fleet, thus saving the day. Except they're now trapped because there's a force field that Cobra Commander dropped. So Ambush and Hawk are about to die. Good job. Good job, G.I. Joe. We're about to see the death of a couple of our guys. Here we go. How they survive this, I don't know. Okay, that's a cop-out.
Yeah, big time.
That is a severe cop-out. There was a force field blocking them in, and right when the thing exploded, and they would have been smashed against that force field.
100% Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, absolutely no reason. It just now, one could argue that maybe the force field was powered by the lava, so when the lava stopped flowing, the force field stopped. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Sure. That there's something to that, but I feel like the force of the explosion would have hit them into that before the power cut off, well before.
Look, guys, she's gonna.
But anyway,
probably so. Yes.
What am I advocating for murder on my favorite cartoon? Not really. I really didn't want to see Hawk with his brains beat in. That's not what I wanted, so I'm okay with it. You know what I just noticed for the first time? These space cannons. You know what they look like? And they call them space cannons. They're transformer cannons.
Really? Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, they look like the cannon that Galvatron had on his arm after Megatron became Galvatron.
You're right. You're exactly right.
Another G.I. Joe Transformer crossover tie-in.
I wonder if that's borrowed, like if this has already been animated at some point in time and they just blended that in. Oh no, but you know what? I know what it probably is. It's probably has already been designed and drawn up, and they're referencing that. So.
Well, I don't know if we've done a few like Transformer centric episodes of Joe and Joe, and in my headcanon, I'm always looking for ways to. Well, actually, I don't even have to make it up because we know that G.I. Joe is in the same universe because of Flint's daughter.
Yes, right.
So, in my headcanon, that absolutely is a Cybertronian technology that they just used. They when they were in their Cobra's research and travels, they found this quote space cannon. Yeah.
No problem.
I'm down. I'm down with that entirely. They call it a space cannon.
Yeah.
That means I bet you they knew it came from space.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Okay, done. I wish I'd thought of that earlier. I don't know why I didn't. There's a lot of missiles flying at Cobra Commander. And
a whole lot.
Here's the thing. If I'm Cobra Commander and I'm building this whole suit of armor in a world of jetpacks, I'm putting a jetpack on it. Why doesn't that suit have a jetpack?
Yeah. I am, in this series, wasn't the armor like a way of, because he had just mutated back from a snake to kind of like, I don't know, stabilize him or something. I'm not a big fan of.
They never explicitly said that, but I always thought that's what it was. When he got it, he had been running around nude, frankly nude, for a few episodes as a reptilian guy, and they said, "Hey, here's one of your alternate designs that you had as a costume." Yeah. But that always sounded hollow to me. It makes 100% sense that it's some sort of stabilization. To
help him.
He's half
continue
reptilian.
To mutate back or whatever. Yeah.
Maybe because he's cold-blooded, it needs to keep his temperature up or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, for real.
That's great.
Yeah, he's reptilian. Yeah. Okay. Well, these two dudes are way too comfortable being in their skivvies next to each other.
No doubt.
Once again, the weed whacker was hanging out with another alligator.
What's with that?
The Joes are now getting attacked by the UN.
I thought you
because they forgot to tell the military. Okay, wait, this is.
Well, there's where the satellite was. That was the satellite. They knocked the wrong one out.
Hawk is way too awkward in a Speedo. There's a lot going on wrong. The Joes were so hot to get back to R&R, they never told the UN that the fight was over. They were like,
you would think.
We need it. And now they get into their Speedos? What about when the show started last episode and there's no threat of anything? No threat. And they're not in Speedos yet.
No, full-fledged uniforms.
Now they're just off a battle, and they're like, let's strip down and let's make it happen. What is going on? What is up? This episode went really weird, really quick. Like, I'm on board, and then it just goes Speedo right at the last 30 seconds. With a huge crotch shot of Hawk, like lounging with his arms like a bodybuilder who wants you just to stare at his oiled crotch.
What would have made that so much better is if they completely needed Gridiron there in his Speedo with his helmet on.
Oh yeah, well yeah, of course. Oh my goodness gracious. Wow, man, Karl Stern, thank you for joining. Thank you for doing this last 2 weeks, man. This has been a delight.
My pleasure. Yes, my pleasure. Big fan of G.I. Joe. Love the show. Love you're doing this, man.
Oh,
Love
man.
it.
I appreciate that so much, and I appreciate you.
I mean, look, no, you need like some sort of medal or something. You understand you are taking on the Deke episodes like many people have took on Sunbow. Okay, that's fine. No problem. You muscled up and said, you know what? Here I am. I'm gonna. Neon does not scare me.
Nope.
Shouting lunatics with missiles, not a problem. Women that don't speak. Now, culturally, I may not be down with that, but we'll work through that. Whatever. But you know what? Let's hit this Deke series. Kudos.
Thank you. I will accept that gladly. I'm so happy to do it, and I'm happy because if I hadn't done it, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to chat with you, Karl Stern, from whenitwascool.com. Thank you so much, buddy. I appreciate you doing this. It means a lot. And remember, don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, as we learned last episode, we're talking to Dragon King Karl, the forensic investigator of the G.I. Joe squad. So now you Joe, everyone, and Joeing is half the battle.